Module 3, the practice of language assessment, building quality system for language assessment. When we say that any product or service is good quality, we generally mean that it consistently lives up to the better than we expect. For many people, as good quality cars is safe, for comfortable, and always starts when we want. It's a good quality hotel has clean, quiet, and comfortable rooms with equipment that works well and staff who respond promptly and politely when have a request. When thinking about buying a new product or using a new service, people often want to find its quality that may read reviews or websites or in magazines or ask their friends about it. They using short period to find out they like the expectation of people of any service product will depend about their people look for different things in hotel depending on whether they will be stay here alone or business trip one night or for their family vacation for a week. Expectation are also affected by the factors such as price. People expect 5-star luxury hotel, they may expect cheap car to go very fast or smooth comfortable as limousine. Similarly, it will be unrealistic to expect teacher working under sick time pressure to produce assessment with the same qualities that are demanded on the test of large international testing agencies. Equal large testing agencies can be expected to produce assessment that take into account what individual teacher has chosen to cover in class over the past few weeks. Groundland 1989, but one expectation is assessment on one hand of assessment such as other have two different types of assessment and produce as the assessment. What can do to ensure the assessments would make as good as they can be that are of high quality according to White 1998. From business management have become increasingly influential in language education. The concept of particular importance that language assessment are standards of quality management. Seville 2013 standards describe the characteristic of the product of the service such as consistently environmental friendliness and safety economy when product system work well and safely and economical cost because they met predetermined standards quality management. It means achieving and surpassing standards and involve continuously improvement the effectiveness and efficiency of organization of the process it carries out. This module will look quality standard for language assessment and steps that can be taken to build the principle of continuous improvement into their development on and ongoing use. Module to show that use concept includes practice that are carried out to meet very wide variety of different purposes. It is inevitable that high quality should have different meaning for classroom teacher. Experimenting with a new approach for formative assessment. A program leader has to develop achievement tests for use in college for the Ministry of Education of Testing Agency. Developing a new test for nationwide different use of the language assessments are sometimes seen to be manually incapable of the some of commenters suggest that large-scale proficiency tests of the classroom assessment should be approached in a different way to resource available in setting the kinds of information needed in implication of decisions will certainly different. Assessments of all kinds of attaining good quality evidence of the assessee's knowledge, skills, or abilities. The principles presented in this module are based on a practical advice offered of a range language assessment textbooks and intended to relevant across the broad and spectrum of the language assessment context. Effective assessment comes at a price that vary institution as the resource to employ a full array of the trained assessment professionals of by Bach 2009, including specialist assessment, psychometricians, educational measurement, and graphic designers. Nonetheless, all institutions is entertaining capacity to improve their current practice. Fortunately, acknowledging a few basic principles can help develop a assessment for to improve the acronym price play and reflection lead the improvement and supported by cooperation and informed by evidence. Planning should be always be built into development and any new project and assessment are expected there more throughout the plans the better assessments is likely to be reflections and review fundamentals of good quality system, the effectiveness of the plan of the current materials practice in fulfilling the purpose should be constantly with the questions and evaluate improvement on the current materials of the practice of them. Always possible should be constant aim of any assessment system. Reflection is directed towards making improvement. Cooperation and teamwork are essential to the development of good assessment materials and practices. Shared ideas and shared criticism, reflecting and for improvement. Evidence is the basis for good decision making. Reflection based on a good evidence as much as constructive than prejudiced goes work as a means of improving quality, effective recording, keeping help improve everyone involved to understand whether their produced materials could be made systematic analysis informed effective improvement, planning reflection improvement, the first three price principles, planning reflection improvement, and suggest a regular plan to review, schedule in the assessment and evaluate ideas for improvement, but put forward for integration within the plans for the next time the assessment will be used. These principles do not only apply to local developed material assessment that have worked well location with one group. Learners may not be equally that the materials both from publishers or external agencies should be subject to the same process of the critical review. Locally development checklist provided checklists intended to help this process. The cooperation and evidence are the conditions required to make planning, reflections, and improvement effective cooperation. Awareness of poor assessment practice is a mistaken belief that individual aspects and experience can guarantee quality and experience. Teacher is trusted to produce and carry out assessments in a better than does not mean that novice will be given any help with job and expert in assessment in issue to produce material that the teacher with no specialist training. This may seem reasonable, but materials produced by the most skilled best trained individual have faults and idiosyncrasies where 1993 page 19 said the point developing assessment should be group activity individual acting like a plan design and put into practice are really assessment system the fact of various kinds assessment important at the planning stage to agree on stance of work towards if individual teachers very different approach either in the creating assessment or in judging performance. Learning can become a disjoint and confusing experience. Davidson and Lynch 2002 argued that good assessment are developed by consensus of their by imposition when people combine their efforts and everyone involved has a say to develop the assessment such as change will run successfully and that problem will means in teacher are able to work together, contribute to the shared collection or bank of assessment material. The system can become efficient as well as more coherent and effective. The following chapters of the book suggest organizing and coordinating shared activity on our aspect, covering listening and reflection. The work as team members should be checked and repeatedly evaluated. A second opinion on the assessment materials is always necessary. Having a third even better, someone with different view often able to spot problems, errors, and Twitter one scorer. Whenever possible, classroom teachers should work with their colleagues in regularly reviewing their overall approach to assessment, the specific techniques and materials they intend to use, the decision they make when awarding scores, collecting evidence, and very widespread shortcoming in much assessment practice in paradoxically, an assessment itself often grants excitements. An assessment usually attempt do we find out the decision taken on the basis of an assessment that right decision. Equation may be taken to guard against obvious disaster. Questions that are different for the student test papers getting lost or stolen recording equipment breaking down, but few people or institutions seriously try to answer the important question of whether assessment has really provided information that is as comprehensive as useful as it could be, whether things might be done better next time, where language learner really plays into the most appropriate class into the basis of the placement test, where in such form of assessments such as effectively improve learning, following of the university entrance test where the student for the accepted for the course where the new employees hired for the taking efficiently for the carry out their work foreign language adequate answer to the questions like they will also collected rigorously and systematically. However, many educational systems offer from the scores of grades very little information of any kind of ever collected about assessment in these circumstances, it is impossible to be confident that an assessment has provided relevant and adequate information about the assessees as another vital sources of the evidence. Very language assessment handbook insists be tried by the trials in some way, particularly in its abuse in a high-tech assessment decision with serious consequence for the assessment, without compromising the security of any confidential test material. Assesses who is similar as possible to those who will take the operational assessment. Used on the basis for decision making are given tasks that under development, the response to each question are recorded and scored and result and our analysis is statistically and really capable in providing that information. It's designed to correct reports about experience collect from test takers. Administering the assessment can also help in identifying problems. Analysis of the important role the practice of the language assessments, particularly support for the formal testing. It is a basic understanding of statistic of the need to understand how results should be interpreted. A short overview of the techniques and their application can be found on website when intentions were not stated, understood procedures and consistently followed, and evidence not carefully collected, it impossible to tell how bad assessment have been fulfilling its purposes, although experience that likely to be poor and nobody explains just what assessment is supposed to measure. Is impossible to judge whether or not it's been successful in measuring, capturing, anything meaningful. If nobody keeps record to answer that assessees give to each question, it's become impossible to tell whether the questions are dramatic and nobody provides guidance in which answer can be accepted and which are incorrect. When different people and assessment each one may judge or some answer differently. If nobody sets on how time each assessee help, they can use some way unfairly or receive more help than others, and absence of standard for the language assessment. The results may be meaningless if they cannot be useful. Practice will certainly improve without evidence is will not be clear on how should be improved the assessment cycle. When improvement is sought, assessments and assessment systems should not be seen just as products such as test papers or such events such as role plays or 1 hour written examinations or even as a series of linked events about the assessee's incident. Assessment should be viewed as the continuous repeating cycles of the activities. The process does not an even decision about assessees made about can be modified, improved, after the cycle begins again next time around. The quality and of assessment will be better within overall cycles used to identify sequence of activities associated particular functions of each role different person or a group of people. Some may even be carried out automatical machines. Persons or group may carry out several roles in large-scale assessment programs. Each activity in be involved documentation so different groups of individuals can coordinate their contributions. Stage 1 count designers objectives specification as from module 1 and Hughes and 2003 page 9 assessment is to make oneself perfectly clear what is one to know and what purpose. Fulcher 2010 compare the designers of assessment. The architect begins with an understanding purposes of the building that he or she is going design consider among their location and available budget turns to plans, constructions, and buildings. Architect provides detailed drawing and construction for the builders. This plan include materials used to the precisely of the room and so on. Just as the architects needs to before beginning at the building intended as a family home as a shopping center. The designer of an assessment needed to be clear and decision for the decision of assessment to be intended to inform many assessment projects fails before they begin because too little attention is given to what people who will use the results to make decision. Often, at the outset of the years themselves may not be very clear about what kinds of information they really need. This is reinforced the needed cooperation. The designers of the assessment need to consult closely with the users and to be sure that builds understanding of the intended purposes from the outset. As part of the planning process, it is necessary to decide who will be involved in this delivery, administration, and to take account their views of developing an assessment as one of means of ensuring coherence, which is important that the procedures followed in making a useful product or carrying out a product can be repeated on a step of the have to be recorded rigorously, make replication possible. This is also is help the likely resolution of the problems or they occur according to the purpose of the formality of the assessment. Different assessment as the content of the administration may need to be more less strictly replicable. Large-scale tests are often standardized by the content of test conditions for the administrations are carefully delineated and controlled so each assessee will have the same test-taking experience. For the reasons of the security, the same questions can be used every time test is given to of different assessment material that follow exactly the same designs but include different content are produced tests are intended to be similar enough to be give comparable results or is given different groups of people, different times and different places. Assessee who score 57% on the form a lot of should be very close to 57% as the form B. Two forms include the very different material administered under the different conditions. The results will not be directly comparable in many kinds of formative assessment. Standardization is unnecessary and could be in counterproductive as teachers may wish to adjust procedures according to the needs to their students. Nonetheless, the specification the key documents that communicates standards of the guide how assessment is to be reduced, administered, and replicable is not a specification. The specification sets a plan of collecting observation evidence that will inform judgments about how much knowledge, skills, or abilities our learners has connecting theoretical understanding of the language with the decision that the users will make about the assessment. Specification typically include three elements of the design statements and assessment blueprints and task specifications designs. The assessment when considering decisions of the assessment of an approach, assessment within school curriculum, it is important for those involved to decide begin considering collectively answering some fundamental questions. This is the purpose of the assessment, what decision needs to be taken, who should be taken decision, what effects will be decision of the thesis and on others who will be involved in developing in the assessment in addition to be a decision makers of assessees who else has an interest or strict assessment, how will they take into account, how will be the assessee if someone assesses have a special requirement, example different learners taking speaking tasks, partial taking a test or reading skills, how will be met, will an adaptation of decision, what aspect of language and which curriculum objectives are relevant to the decision, how are these aspect of the language believed to connect to the decision, how much information about the assessee's knowledge, skills, or abilities will be needed to support the decision. The specification, the key document of communicates standard assessment is to produce administered and replicable known as the specification. The specification says out of land collecting observable evidence of judgment, how much knowledge, skills, or abilities learners has correcting theoretical understanding of language will decision that users will make about the assessees. An assessment is the only obtained relevant information what other sources might be used. Another suitable assessment already available is an assessment the most efficient to obtain the relevant information. Could other source be used to supplement the classroom assessment should be focused beyond the whole class or the group of student pairs of the student individuals. Will all students assess for only subsets with the best of way to report the results that they are helpful possible users. What effects is the implementation of the assessment attendant to have teaching and learning? What unintended negative effects will have done to prevent these blueprints? Just as builders need to detail plans or blueprints in order to construct a building, to those involved in preparing an assessment need more than this design statement if they are going to produce material that match with what the designer intended. Assessment blueprints include clear assessment statement about content to be covered, what methods are be used, how many papers or sections there, how long to test takes on Anderson et al. 1995, page 10.